Hi, I'm Mary May of Mary May's Online School of Traditional Wood Carving. Please feel free to click on the link on the screen and to see what my school is all about. Now recently, Mark Harrell of Bad Axe Toolworks, that's Bad Axe, A-X-E, Toolworks, has asked me to help him out on some instruction on how to carve a detail on a little scroll of a handle. Okay, their company is providing a kit that's actually a reproduction of a traditional 1760s rouleau style frame saw. Now originally these were two-man saws, but he has actually reduced it in proportion down so one person can use it. So he will provide all of the materials, the wood, any kind of hardware, any kind of joinery, and also templates of this profile. Now you'll be getting square pieces of wood, you'll have to profile them and then carve them. But everything comes in the kit. Now this design is based on a frame saw that was designed by Andre Rouleau back in 1760, and this is from a book called To Make as Perfectly as Possible, Rouleau on Marquetry, and this is being published by Lost Art Press. Now, I would encourage you to join my online school as a free member, and that will get you started with sharpening tools, and that'll get you sort of just to get comfortable with using some of the tools. So feel free to join. Again, it's free for the beginning videos. It'll get you started, and then you can get into this, and then a lot of it will make a little bit more sense. Or you can just dive right in, however you feel. But let's get started on the carving. Okay, I have my lucky carving apron on, and let's get started. So first of all, you need to actually be able to lay this out on the wood, and a template of this curl, of this scroll, is provided. And what I would suggest is taking carbon paper. You can find this at office supply stores. You can find it at some woodworking stores, but you usually have to buy a huge sheet of it. All right, if you look at this, it's transferred on like so. Now just keep in mind that this edge, as it curves around, that this should be a continuous, gentle flow. If it's shifted over and this step between this edge and this is a little off, your eye will try to follow and it just doesn't quite get there. So a good idea is sometimes just visually, because this little edge there can be a little distracting. So sort of cover that up so you can't really see that, and then look at that edge and make sure that it has a really sweet curve continuing around. Okay, so positioning and placing that template can be a challenge. So you might want to actually cut out the template so you can lay it on accurately along the edge. Cut out the outline so you can sort of line up the outline along the edge. Otherwise, it's just a flat piece of paper and you have to sort of align it, and it's sometimes hard to see the wood underneath it and make sure it's positioned correctly. I'm going to be doing this and showing you as if you've never carved before. So I'm going to be going over a lot of real basic carving techniques. So bear with me if you have carved before. This might be a little bit of a repeat lesson, but anyway, it's always good to reinforce those those techniques. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with my V-chisel. V-chisel is exactly that, shaped like a V. And I'm going to come along and carve on this side of that line. Now quite often when I carve, I like to take a V-chisel just to sort of clear away a lot of the wood in order to, if I want like this line here, because I want that to be defined as the edge, if I make that cut and define that right now, just go with a curved gouge that fits that and go straight into it. First of all, oak is going to be very hard to get to the full depth that you want, and you could also just shatter the wood. It can be so brittle, and you can break things that you don't want to break. So what I like to do is take a V-chisel very close to that line, right alongside that line first, to remove that wood, and then I'm going to come and make a vertical cut right on that line to define that. And what happens is it actually gives towards the V-cut. All right, so it sort of clears away the wood to make those cuts a little bit easier. So I'll go over that a little bit more as we go. Okay, and you can either use a mallet to get through this, or if you want to push through it, make sure that your tools are razor sharp. And again, I would recommend becoming a free member to my online school and learning how to sharpen the tools, because your V-chisel is very important to make sure it's very sharp. Actually, with oak, you need them all to be very sharp. So I'm going to show you two different techniques. One is with a mallet, and I'm just going to start this just very lightly. And the thing is about a mallet, a lot of times you think, well, you just want to use it to hog out massive amounts of wood, but I'm actually using it for this process to actually control it. Okay, and it comes along there. Now I could push through, but sometimes with really hard wood like this, it ends up actually slipping, or certainly easier to slip further than what you want. So sometimes the mallet itself will really control it. Just very light tapping. And then as I'm doing this, I'm sort of twisting and moving my hand, moving my whole body actually. If you look at it from a distance, I'm starting here, all right, and then as it curves around, all right, the positioning of my hand hasn't really moved, it's just my body moving around it. And that keeps it pretty consistent. If I do this and I'm flexing my hand and flexing my wrist, there's a lot of possibility of it to sort of wave in all different directions. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, because I don't really like cutting towards myself, I'm going to come from this point and I'm going to continue or finish that cut and meet with that. Now, just keep in mind, it's going to be deeper here than it is as it gets to the center. So I just have to keep that in mind. I'm going probably about 1/16 of an inch down right now. It's going to go a little bit deeper when I define the edge, but this is all really I need to do right now. Now this, I'm going to do a little bit of a curve in there and then a little bit deeper. Okay, and I think that's just enough to clear away, just so I can start making and defining this the outside edge. And what I'm going to do is take pretty much number 5 gouges, various width number 5s, and as I start defining that, it's going to get smaller and smaller width, because it's, number 5 defines the actual curvature, and then we've got the width in millimeters. So the first cut I'm going to make here is going to be with a number 5/14, and again I want to make sure that that's lined up right like that, and that continues very nicely along there. And I'm just going to use my mallet. All right, make a nice solid cut, but you see what happens, it actually gives towards that V-cut that I made, and it doesn't damage anything on the actual scroll itself. So I'm going to sort of walk it along a little bit further, and I just have to monitor it. Now keep in mind, not all carving gouges are created equal, or certainly not the same size. My number 5/14 might be slightly different curvature for different brands. So keep that in mind. You may have to just sort of be a little flexible with how to what tools to use. And you may also have to, let me just show you a technique that I use. If it doesn't quite fit, I sort of tip the tool slightly and make a cut, and then tip the tool a little bit more, And what it does is it changes the shape of this, so I'm only really using about 1/3 of the tool, and I'm doing more of sort of a walking it along, and I can make it more curved than it actually is. So those are just tricks that I've learned along the way if you don't have exactly that size. Okay, now as this curves around and gets a little tighter, I'm going to have to change this. So right there, it probably fits up to there, but then I'm going to need to change. And one thing I want to be careful, and I'm just going to point out certain parts of this that could potentially break. All right, the grain is going in this direction, and there is a vulnerable area right there, which could potentially break off that little area there. And then that nice sweet scroll will be curved there, a nice straight line, and then curved there, and also potentially right there. All right, so there are certain things that will cause that, and let me just show you what happens. If I just continue along here, go da 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 da, and continue a cut like that, just walk it along, start from here and go in that direction, that is really where it's vulnerable. If I make a cut there and use my mallet, I could potentially jar that and open that up. Okay, also coming from this direction, well, that tool's not quite the right size, but anyway, that's really what causes that. If you just sort of go along and walk along it, ideally that would be nice if you could just start at one side and go, but there are just some things to be very cautious of. So when you have that area where the grain's going like this and you're coming from the top and going down, all right, you want to start making the cut right at the peak of that and come from that direction and that direction, from there and that direction. Okay, so I'm going to be using several different tools. I'm still going to be sticking with the number 5. And I'm just going to make a cut right at the top there, right, and then walk it along. Now this tool is just not exactly fitting. It's a tricky part when you transition from one size to the next. Let me just try. That was number 5, 12 millimeter. This is number 5, 8. And again, starting here and sort of walking it down that way. So I'm pressing during this. You could use your mallet too, but since I'm just sort of, there's not a lot to remove here. So start at the top and come in that direction. You see what I'm doing? I'm sort of setting it in and I'm rolling the tool. And that's really the technique if you are sort of pressing into it rather than mallet. Okay, so again, starting at the peak, going down in that direction, starting at the peak, going in that direction. Okay, and let's just see if I can continue to go. This is where, if I wanted to continue around there, it's getting pretty tight for this tool that I have in my hand. Watch what I'm doing just so I can still use this for a little while. Sort of angling it like so. Angling the tool, so I'm just making small cuts and walking it away. But keep in mind, as I'm doing this, I'm not letting this side of the tool go into the wood. I'm keeping it at an angle, so I'm just using it, almost using it like it's a knife. Okay, now I'm going to go for the smallest, number 5. This is number 5, 6. And again, this is where it's probably not as critical because it's such a small cut, but probably a good idea to start there and then move from there up in this direction. Because again, I could potentially make this cut first and sort of open that up and split that little area, and that nice sweet little scroll shape is lost. And really at that point, the only way to fix that is to make the scroll smaller. And if you do that too many times, you get this little tiny scroll, and you can customize it, I suppose, if you want to do that, but it's just not ideal. Okay, so now we've got that defined. Now what I want to do is start lowering down the outside and just tapering it. So I'm going to start about, let's just say to that area right there, and I'm just going to draw, this is approximate area where I'm going to start, and it's going to blend into this surface. Okay, so I'm not going to do any shaping of this outside edge because all of that is going to be really blending with the rest of this. If you're going to take and rasp this or soften that corner, then just continue and soften this edge too. What I'm going to show you is pretty much from this point and continue from about there, continuing on. So don't worry about this outside edge. That's all going to be done in another step of actually doing the shaping of it and the actual profiling and detailing of that final surface. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take that same number 514, and now notice how I've got my hand really locked and touching the wood. So I always have this part of my hand touching something, and that really ends up holding and guiding and controlling that tool. And also watch what's happening. I'm doing a twisting motion. So it's going forward, but it's also twisting. Okay, and this is where you're going to determine whether that vertical cut was deep enough. And if it's not, then just go back, do sort of this little wiggle cut, kind of set it in and clean that up. Okay, so I don't want to have a real obvious slant down. It's just going to very gently slope. And I don't want a transition corner there either. Okay, so as I'm doing this, the way to prevent it from hitting too hard is doing that twisting. So it's going forward, but also slight twisting. It helps it get through the wood, especially with this oak. It's very hard wood. It'll help it get through and also control how hard it hits this edge. It's very easy to damage and rough up that edge, that nice clean edge that was just defined. Okay, so right there, a little bit more defining that edge. Okay, so there's, it's kind of a rough surface right there, but what I'm doing this first time through is really just taking and removing the wood. Now, what I'm doing here, if you take a look at it from the distance, right, from the distant view, I'm going to be cutting in this direction. All right, I don't cut towards myself, but what I'm doing along this way is I'm actually stepping away from the carving. All right, so there are just going to be some areas here where I could either turn it around. All right, I could either turn the actual carving around and come in that direction, much safer. But I'm all set up here, and but I just want to show you there are times when you might have to go carve towards yourself. I really would not recommend it, but if you do carve sort of backwards, you want to step out of the way. So if for some reason either you're pressing harder than you're really thinking you were and it goes right through the wood, you're not on that side of the blade. Okay, so just be very careful with that. And that's actually one of the reasons that I like to use these long handled gouges, because it's very tempting sometimes with shorter palm gouges to just hold it with one hand, and then what happens is you've got that and then you've got your hand somewhere else. So I just I really am reluctant to recommend using those tools. I don't like to have your DNA on the carving. as little DNA attached to your carving as possible. Okay, so now just very, very gently go towards that. The trickiest part is not letting it hit so hard. All right, another way you can do it is coming from here and going right alongside. All right, but make sure if you're going to do it that way, come from here in this direction, from here and that direction, and then this little area there from here and that direction. That is the direction of the grain. All right, if I tried to do that and come in this direction, I'd be cutting into the wall there, into this area, and be cutting against the grain and could lose a lot of that wood. So you can either go straight in towards it or along the edge, but if you're going along the edge, then you really need to make sure that that corner does not go underneath this center scroll and then potentially lifting that. So really keep an eye on where that edge is. or where the corner of the tool is. And also, if that vertical cut was not cleanly defined and really all the way down to the base, by going along there like that, if this vertical cut was not deep enough, much easier to chip out that corner. So if you're sort of wondering, and I'm actually wondering right there, that whether you need to define that a little bit more, best to err on the side of caution and make sure that that is definitely cut. Okay, and then when I go right up to it, it's just going to have a nice clean cut. Okay, so right about there, that's where the grain switches. If I try to pursue that and push that, it's going to probably take out much more wood than I want. So I have to come in this direction and complete that. But there's going to be this little area right there, very hard to clean out. That's when you probably will have to come across the grain and clean that up. Okay, so I haven't really pursued, oops, let me just clean that up. Clean that edge up a little bit more, just looking a little sloppy. Okay, so at the deepest, this edge is really only about 1/16 of an inch. You can certainly go deeper if you want, just to make it that much more dramatic. Okay, now right here, this is a difficult transition right here because I want it to blend into the surface, but I don't want it to be sort of a step. All right, so I'm just going to start to take this down a little bit. Now notice all of these cuts are going very close to that outside edge. I don't want to get right to that edge because, again, that outside edge is going to be defined by the rasp or whatever tool you end up using that starts profiling and defining that edge. So if I end up getting this too close to the edge, it's going to actually change the shape of that edge. If you do round that or soften that corner, just don't want that to be affected in any way. So just leave about another 1/16 of an inch along the edge here. All right, so right here, just going to do a little bit of a curve or cut down there and blend that into that. Okay, so there's still a surface. I'm going to take a number 3 14 millimeter, and I'm just going to come along here and just sort of shave off that surface. In other words, just shave off the high spots so it catches the high spots, and then blend that into there. So if there is any tool marks, you want to just remove that at this point. And then kind of blend that so there's not really that step. Okay, again, in this direction up to here, and then this direction. And then of course there's that point there where I probably will have to come right across the grain to clean that up. Now it's a little deceiving sometimes with oak because there's so much grain in it. It's a little hard to tell sometimes where things are working and aren't working, so you almost have to just sort of touch it to feel. You better, much easier to do that than to actually sense or to see it. So what I'm going to do now is, you can either leave this sharp if you want. It's really up to you. That's all sort of personal preference. But I think that because all of this probably should be softened with the rasp, I'm going to go along and right starting there, just going to do a little bit of softening of that. Right, go from that in that direction, from there to there. Let me just draw some arrows. The best direction to take it is from there in this direction, from there to that direction, from there to that direction, and that direction, right? And stop right at that point where the grain switches. Let's just do another arrow from there to there. Right at that grain switches right there. Now, if you go into my online school and learn the donut exercise. That's exactly what this is. Shows you which direction is most ideal to go. And so you don't carve against the grain. And all that is really doing is just softening it. And I can take the tool and turn it over and bring it in a little bit. It gets a little awkward sometimes if I try to do this. You just need to be careful as I'm doing that what is happening with this side of the tool, because I could end up digging holes in the surface. So quite often I just take it and kind of round it like that and just take that surface down. All right, now I've got all these pencil lines that I don't like. So I'm going to erase those now so it doesn't get distracting. Okay, and that is pretty much it. Let's just hold it up and take a look. Okay, so there we have it from all different angles. Okay, and in the process of finishing this and sanding the surface, you can sand this surface down, just blend it with everything so it doesn't look different, the surface doesn't appear different than the rest. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's been really exciting being a part of this project of just recreating this and bringing back to life this Andre Roubaud's style that really, it doesn't matter how old it is, it's always incredible, always beautiful. So thank you for watching. It's been a lot of fun and happy carving.